Today we begin with Psalms 92, and it's a worship psalm. And it's a good thing to give thanks unto the Lord and give praises unto his name, O Most High, to show forth thy loving kindness in the mornings and thy faithfulness in every night. The idea that he has loving kindness and he has faithfulness every night. We tend to forget that sometimes. We tend to think that he's not paying attention to our lives, and yet we need these remembrances. Many of these praises are not just there as just some empty praise to him. He likes to hear himself being praised. But we're saying things about his character that are important. And it's a reminder, a remembrance also. Remember, we had the song of Miriam and Moses. We have the song of Moses right before his death. These are also forms of remembrance. Many of the hymns that we do in church are not just not for the fun of singing or the joy of singing. They're supposed to be remembrances of who he is. But we need to remember that we need to keep the songs clear about who he is. Sometimes they get a little murky about his character. And upon an instrument of 10 strings and the psalter and the harp, to bring out instruments of music and play for timbre. There's even dance. Dancing was okay. David danced. I think that sometimes some of these denominations are taking dancing too far. Then it becomes too exuberant. I don't want to get into that too far, but we really need to keep our emotions lined up with the Word of God, and that our church services don't just become dance parties. And so, O Lord, how great are your works, and your thoughts are very deep. The brutish man knows you not, neither does the fool understand this. The psalm goes on to talk about the excellency of God and how brutish people don't know him. But my horn shalt thou exalt, like the horn of a unicorn. I shall be anointed with fresh oil. I won't be like the brutish man. I won't be like the fool. I will know who you are, and I will worship who you are, and I will praise who you are. The righteous will flourish like the palm tree. He will grow like the cedar in Lebanon. Again, cedars are very strong trees. Their roots go down very deep. They're considered one of the strongest of trees. Palm trees stand up. They're seen. They're tall. They have a lot of glory to them. You can see a palm tree from afar off. And mine eyes says that those that are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall bring forth fruit. In old age, they shall be fat and flourishing, to show that the Lord is upright. He is the rock, and there's no unrighteousness in him. We should be mirrors of him. If there's no unrighteousness in him, he has been fighting for, if he's putting his name on his people, these people need to be righteous. That's what we're seeing. Many of these Psalms seem to also run parallel with where we are in Joshua, that he's fighting for his own righteousness. And if that means clearing the land out of all these people, then that's the way it has to be. Now, many of the peoples, I was just doing my reading, that some of them also did like the Gibeonites and became under tribute. We will do what you say. And what they're really saying there is, we will do what your God says. Really, when Israel is in obedience, let me say that, then they are doing what? They are a conduit of the laws of God. When they're not, they're just another nation with their foot on the neck of other nations. So we have to be very clear about that. Israel is not always Israel. The good Israel, the righteous Israel, is the Israel that's following God. But here I love this scripture that I'm going to meditate on. They shall bring forth fruit in their old season. They shall be fat and flourishing. The idea of fat and flourishing is not just big for your own sake. Fat means you have what you can give to others, and you're flourishing so that others may enjoy the fruits of your labor and the fruits of your strength. And you can even do that in old age. So looking at 92, again, look at that very carefully. It's not just worship. It's the words. Again, with this gleaning understanding, with this empirical evidentiary understanding where you're going across, see the little words. The little words create big things, and see what it's saying there. So I do like 92, and I'm going to meditate on that one scripture. When we're going into chapter 13 of Joshua, we have to remember that we've just conquered a lot of the land. And then there's little pockets that need to be taken care of. They took care of the big, they came across, they took care of Og and Bashan. They took care of Shihon and Hezbon. on the east side and all the 60 um, little villages and things there, the cities. Then they moved across. And then they did Jericho, Ai. They made peace with the Gibeonites, which represented a lot of different cities, by the way. It just wasn't one area, but there was an area there that would fall under tribute to Israel. Then they moved south, took care of those, and then they moved north. And it seems like the funny thing I was telling my son, that it seems like everywhere they went, it got a little bit bigger, got a little bit deeper. It's like, when do we ever get a break? But God was with them. God led them. Remember, before Jericho, Joshua met a man who was the captain of the Lord's host. He went with them. He wasn't just looking over the board, like you're playing Monopoly, like men are just chess pieces. God came down and was leading with him. Now, I don't say he wasn't with him every moment in a physical form, but he did talk with him. He did send his spirit forth. There are times when he threw hails at the enemies, that idea that he is in the midst of this battle. And if I have a battle, you have a battle, he can be in the midst of our battles. We tend to want to fight things by ourselves when we've got a captain of the Lord host available to us. When we go into 13, Joshua's getting old, and now it's time to pass the baton. It went from God to Moses, Moses to Joshua, but now it's going to go to the individual tribes. He's going to establish their areas by lot, but they have to go and really conquer that land. They still have people to be driven out. They haven't driven them all out. Some of them will fall under tribute. We will see. Others need to be either driven out or they get the sword. And again, this is in the establishment of the nation of Israel, not the religion of Israel. Let's draw a line there. The establishment of the nation of Israel was with the sword. And I hate to say this, but it seems like all nations use the sword at one time or another to establish their boundaries. Maybe God's trying to set it up. We will see that with the giving of the inheritance by lot to every of the 12 tribes, they cannot fight with their brothers for land because your border is here and no further. His border is here and no further. This person's border is here and no further. So they're not going to be fighting for land. They're going to trade with one another. They're going to grow economically. Most people want more land because they feel like A, they want more resources, but B, they want more land to either cultivate or rent out or own for material possessions. You're going to get all the possessions you need from the land God gives you. Just, apply his word to that land and it will grow up. It will give you what you need. You'll be able to pass it on from one generation to the next. You don't need to spread out because you're going up. So we see this as very clear. Other nations over the world, in the history of the world, people fought for boundaries. The boundaries, the geopolitical map of the world has been different from century to century. Go back in time and see where the boundaries were. And they changed every few years, every 100 years, every 1,000 years. It was all different, So who was really the first ones over here? Who really knows? Who really owns the land in North America, South America, in certain parts of Europe? Who knows? Because we've had so many people have established borders and reestablished borders and redrawn lines. God drew the lines. Stay in them. And there will be no infighting amongst the 12 tribes. So the idea that he is setting them up. So Joshua is getting really old. And he's going to be dying soon. He's stricken with age. And yet and so God is telling him, now there's still pockets to be worn through. He goes through and he says the land of the Gileadites of Lebanon and there's the inhabitants, all these of the Sidonians and all these other big long names that are in here. The Philistines, you need to go. They're going to have to go. I'm going to give them this land. Now they've got to take care of it and do it the way God said. So he starts divvying up the land, and then they're going to have to go out, each tribe, except for the 2.5 that go back over. But each tribe now will be responsible to take their land. And so he starts going through this, and he talking about the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. He goes back over to remind them of where their boundaries are. And these boundaries, again, are drawn by God through Joshua. And so they're to go back and establish their boundaries. Not them. He talks about Reuben has boundaries this way, and then Gad's going to be over here. The half tribe of Manasseh will be in this area over here. And when you're reading this, please do not just glaze over and just give it a cursory reading. We have to realize that we have an inheritance. That's what this is saying. I don't know what my inheritance is going to be. You don't know what yours is going to be, but we have an inheritance. So when you see the detail of the inheritance that God gave them in the physical world, how much more in the spiritual world will we have an inheritance? I don't know if we're going to get geography. I don't know if we're going to get lands. I don't know if we're going to get portions by either family units, families that were, saved. My mom and my dad. I don't know if we're going to fall within that family line. I don't know how God's going to set that up. But I do know that there are mirrors here. There's inklings here for us. When we see God being faithful to the people of God, even in the smallest detail, we need to see that detail and know that he will be faithful to us, even in the smallest details. So here he is. We have 13. Read through it. Read every word. The importance of the gleaning, the importance of, I keep calling it gleaning when I meant to say this evidentiary viewpoint, where we're looking across the grid. I meant to say grid, not gleaning. When you look across the grid, it's important to see every word because, again, those little words reveal something important. So don't pass it over. I've said several times that these videos were not meant to replace reading every word. And like I will tell you that God has instructed me. I read this word for word 7 times before I did this group of videos. God had me start reading the Bible back in 2016. It is now 2023. So this isn't something that I thought about and I just picked up my Bible and I'm going to go through. Read it once, go back and read it again, read it again. In 2020, I read it out loud. You'll learn a lot by reading the word. And I read every word of these out loud, even the ones that are hard to pronounce, to the best of my ability. You'll learn so much. This isn't meant to replace that. Please look at the evidence slowly and build it carefully. If I were building a house for God, I would carefully lay every brick. Think of doing this for God. Carefully lay every brick and make sure that it's plumbed correctly. Take your time. You're not in a hurry. We're not in a foot race to the cross to save our neighbors. We're in a building area for our own, and that they might see and glorify God through our good works. So build your houses carefully. Don't get in a big hurry. That's why I don't like concordances and some of these books that are written, because they just sloppily throw up a wall, throw up some plaster, and write Jesus on it. That's not how God wants it. In 14, he has these drawing by lot, and he draws these lands by lot. And so I don't know how they did it. I'm not even going to try to validate it, but God established this by lot. He created so it would be fair, a form of randomness. Okay, let's roll this. Okay, who gets the north part? It's coming up to Judah. Who gets this part? It's coming to Manasseh. Okay, and so they let the randomness of the lot tell them, not just, well, not, the lot is fair, by the way, So God uses the lot sometimes. We need to be careful how we use the lot, but sometimes the lot comes in handy to help you. Well, again, which one of you should go first? Well, let's throw the lot, okay? According to randomness and stuff, you get to go first. But God doesn't use the lot all the times, but he does use it sometimes. And this creates a form of fairness. Okay, who gave you this land? God did, by lot. So we have on going to the west side of the Jordan in 14. He talks about it. And here, Caleb is of the tribe of Judah. He's a Kenizzite from the tribe of Judah. And he wants his land because God promised him land through Moses because of his faithfulness. Remember, he and Joshua were a part of the first original 12 tribes, 12 spies that went out. And he stood with Joshua saying, we could take the land now. God is with us. Let's go. But unfortunately, the other 10 said no. And the congregation listened to them. And God put everything on hold for 38 years. So that congregation died except for those 2. He says, I'm 85 years old. He takes a mountain with giants in it. See, God hasn't removed these people in these circles. Now it's their job. And many times as Christians, it's our job to take care of the giants in our land. Not just in our geopolitical, but in our homes, our finances, how we deal with the internet, how we deal with our family structure, how we deal with our finances, what we do with our jobs, all these giants that we're to deal with. We're not supposed to kick back. We're supposed to conquer in a certain way through the power of God, not sitting back waiting for God to bring to us, but go out and take that land of being a good Christian at work, or a good, strong father figure, a good, strong mother figure, a good, strong son, daughter, to carefully work with our finances. So he goes and he says, I'm 84 and 5 years old, 80 and 5 years old. He's 85. My mouth is getting ahead of me. And I'm as strong as the day that that Moses sent me out. Here he is, 85, and he's got the same vigor. Now he's had 40 years of weight training. He's had 40 years in the desert. He's had 40 years probably carrying and, doing things that men have to do for sustaining. You have to go bring in wood and you have to go move things around. He wasn't sitting in a chair smoking a pipe. He was involved, but he also knew he had a promise to be involved for. We have a promise to be involved for. Sometimes we kick back and think, well, I'm just waiting for my promise. If you have this promise, get involved in your life for the glory of the promise. So here he is, and he's a very good example. And so God doesn't give him a plain that's easy. He gives him a mountain filled with giants, and he's like, fine. So he goes up with God, with Yahweh, and takes the mountain. And Joshua blessed him and gave unto Caleb his inheritance, and even got Hebron. So the area of Abraham was given to Caleb. I didn't even notice that till I was reading at this time. And this was Hebron was gone by a different name, and the Anakims were there because they'd moved. Remember, the Jews, the Israelites moved out, and so for 400 years, all of these groups have grown in. We talk about the borders of Judah in 15. And again, God has drawn these borders by lot. So again, we go through this. The east side is by the Salt Sea, and the other side is by the Jordan, and you get this going down here. You go going down to Eglon, Enrogel, and he talks about the upper borders. And he goes through this very carefully, drawing these borders. And this is going to be a massive area. When we look at this, so the tribe of Judah is a big tribe. It covers almost all of chapter 15. And again, read through it. He goes the borders up to the north. God cares where the border is. This is important for us to understand. It isn't just, I know how large you are. I know your groupings there. I will draw the border fairly based upon your size. And he gives them all of this. You'll notice from 21, we're given these cities, and the cities go on from 21 through 63, all those different cities. And we're given, there's a whole list of them that were given all the way from the mid-northern part down towards Egypt. And it was very important that we see this. So I can't spend enough time saying don't just glaze through it. There's also a beautiful little story of Caleb here. And God never tells us anything without, us needing to know about how Caleb went up against three sons of Anak, three sons of Anak, which were considered giants, large men. And he said that whoever will take this, he's going to give his daughter to. And of course, Othniel, son of Kenzer, goes and takes the land, and of course, is given Caleb's daughter. Caleb's daughter then goes and asks for a portion of the land for herself, and is given that land. Again, women can own land. You can give that to him. I don't know if maybe Caleb didn't have any sons. Maybe that was the oldest daughter. But the idea that she is also owning land, not just the daughters of Zephelahed. We see the daughters of Zephelahed come up in a couple of chapters, and they stand for what God has promised them. Everyone is standing for what God has promised them. We need to realize that we're not just here to sit and wait. If we have promises, go to God about it. And read this and read every word. And it's good for your brain also. Again, our brains need to be filled with every word. Jesus said every word, not just, well, this is a bunch of big, long words I can't pronounce. Read them anyway. It's good training. If you went to the gym, I use that analogy several times, for weight training. Lift the same weights, lift heavier weights. Go back to light weights. You know, all these words are like weights that you lift up, and the more weights you lift, the stronger your muscles become. The more words you read, the stronger your mind becomes. So don't think that, well, there's a long list of names I can't pronounce. And again, look at the evidence of why is God giving me this information of all these lands, spending one chapter on one tribe. Because again, Jesus was talking about how even the hairs on our head are numbered. He cares about these small things. You can see that as an encouragement that he cared about Judah, gave them a bunch of land, for they were a mighty and a big people. He cares. Every word of this says one thing: God cares. And the more we know the word, the more we glorify him by showing how much we care. So be an evidentiarist. Look it over carefully. Glean from it what's there. Don't move it. Don't put your DNA on it. Don't put your fingerprints on it. Let it sit and let it speak. Thank you.